This is Fit to Succeed in partnership with NordicFitnessEducation.com with hosts Ben Pratt. Thanks for joining us.
Allowing kids to engage in all forms of physical activity and developing their skills in certain areas is absolutely critical for their ability to carry that on into adulthood and have the confidence to be able to explore other forms of movement and do other things that are quite challenging.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Fit to Succeed show. I'm excited today because we have a guest who has a wealth of knowledge in the field of fitness, personal training, strength conditioning. He's got over 2 decades of experience in this field, both in education and directly in contact with clients and with people training in the field. It is David Parker. David, thanks for joining us today on the Fit to Succeed show.
No, thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Now, I've known Dave for quite a long time, but have more recently been interacting and working a little bit alongside him once again. And he spurred my mind as to why we should address the topic that we're going to discuss today, which is the training, the physical adapting and performance of youth, children, teens, whatever you would like to call them. We're going to focus on that today and get into some of the nitty-gritty around that subject. So Dave, first of all, I'm going to ask you what motivated you to specialize in this particular field of training children, youth, in the fields of fitness training, physical conditioning, and sport.
Oh, okay. So I've been working with youth and young people for about 14, nearly 15 years. I think I didn't originally set out to say, right, that's specifically the user group I'm going to work with. It kind of happened by chance, to be fair. Going way back, I was asked to take a speed, agility, quickness session for a bunch of tennis players in the local tennis center. So I said, yep, I'll do that. It sounds like a bit of a challenge. And the age group ranged from about 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age. So I had to think on my feet and I had to do a little bit of research with some of the activities I might do and try to understand tennis a little bit to make it a little bit more specific. So I did my first session and it went very well and the kids that turned up really enjoyed it, and the tennis club asked me to come in on a regular basis, and they increased my number of sessions from 1 to 2 a week up to 6 in the end. So that was how I started to work with children, and I started to really enjoy working with that user group. They were fun to work with, and it just developed from there, really. If I look at how it's developed from that point, then I was working as a personal trainer in the gym, and the gym allowed me to bring children into the gym. They actually at that time had a section for young people, though it was a whole bunch of resistance machines. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, well, that looks a bit like kind of sit down, a bit boring. Let's teach kids proper movement, proper exercise.
So did that gym have those specific smaller equipment designed for younger users?
They did, yes, they did. It was kind of like, well, let's take what we do for adults and apply that to children. And at the time, even then, I thought, that doesn't sit right with me. That really the kids need to be moving about, doing and learning proper movements and skills. And that was the approach I took. So essentially I scrapped all of that and just went back to some of the stuff I was doing with speed, agility, quickness, which was running, jumping, skipping, change of direction, and then start to apply aspects of gym training, which was, squatting, lunging, lifting, rotating, all of those type aspects that I've kind of learned along the way. And the kids really responded to it, nice. which was great. And I've expanded that out even more from my initial dealings with that user group, 9, 10, 11 in a gym environment. I've now moved on from that gym, and I have my own facility I work from, which is quite nice. I have a whole bunch of strength and conditioning equipment in there, but it's more purposely set up for kids to train with some of the things I've learned of things they like to do and do often.
Nice, nice. And hopefully we're going to delve into some of that as we discuss today, Dave. However, there's a question that comes to my mind, and I wonder if some of the listeners might be thinking this right from the offset, which is there are a number of opponents or people who disagree with applying physical training, strength conditioning type work in the gym setting to children. In particular, I've tended to find maybe 3 concerns, and I wonder if you could address each of these. The first is it safe for kids to train in a gym type environment? The second is we always hear this concept of doing weight training, that it might stunt children's growth. And then the third is this aspect of, you kind of touched on it, this aspect of training kids like adults in an adult type environment. Do we lose that sense of play in their physical expression? Could you address those 3 things? Firstly, with the safety of the environment.
Okay, let's go back to the first question. Should they be training in that environment? I think the question is they can do. You just need to make sure that you apply a childlike mindset to the environment, rather than the kind of typical gym is set up for adults. And if you look at like kind of most adults, they can have a rational conversation, they can sit down, do whatever. Whereas, with children, they buzz from wall to wall, particularly the boys. They, as you're probably aware, Ben, with your own children, you can tell them one thing 1 minute and they've completely forgot the next minute. So you do have to apply a mindset of like health and safety, that actually what could get them into trouble. Because if you think it could get them into trouble, it probably will do. And something simple like changing a weight stack, you can get your fingers caught. Or, throwing something randomly, which I've seen over the course of my training with children. So definitely I'm a lot more skilled in understanding the environment. I think, yes, they can do. I think the thing with the biggest thing with whether children go into gym is whether they're emotionally mature enough to take a level of instruction. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to ascertain more so than age. But, it's an environment that, in my experience, many kids have enjoyed. In fact, all of them basically have liked being in the gym and performing certain activities. There are certain activities, particularly on the age group, and I know probably we'll talk about it a little bit later, that I think are appropriate at certain ages. Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that shortly.
Yeah, exactly. And any trainers can take that type of approach. But I'd say that the gym is an environment that that kids could go in, as long as there is a mindset of like, well, we're not dealing with adults here, we're doing young people, and young people can get themselves into trouble. Mm-hmm. And they do things they don't understand that we think, why did they do that?
Yeah, for sure.
And most of the time it's because they are not developed like adults are. Mm-hmm. Even if they're physically developed. And, I'm fortunate to work with one of the local swimming clubs, and probably more so than any other kind of child user group that I've trained is I've been able to take kids from say 7-8 years of age right up to like kind of 16 to 18 years. So I've got these kids for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And it's really taught me how to, get kids to tune in at a young age. What they do at 7, 8 is completely different to what they might do at 15 to 16. Okay. And often you'll have children that are very physically developed from a young age, but they're not emotionally mature. Right. Which means that they could be performing well if they play sports, but when they come into the gym, that social environment, certainly when you get groups of kids together, they do silly things. So for any trainer that's looking to train children in the gym, you've just got to be able to look at the dynamics of who you've got, because it can change drastically depending on the type of child you've got in your session. And that can change from week to week as well, Ben. So you've got to be prepared not to look at things through an adult lens, but look for it through a child's lens. What is it they do? And then the younger they are, the more they're driven by fun, exploratory kind of actions. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you just have to say, well, when I look at my environment, what equipment could they get themselves into trouble with? What could they do? But I need to constrain their behavior. And I don't know whether we'll talk about it, but I'm a big proponent of making sure that actually every child has a positive experience, that I do not set up this cycle of like, sit down, I'm going to, cycle of telling off that you like, just because you can't sit there. It's more to the, well, actually, I need to adapt my processes to get you to tap into what I want you to do, but at the same time, I'm going to give you a little bit about what you want to do, but ultimately, it's guiding them through the stages of development to when they get to the point where, like we're having now, we can have a rational conversation, sit down, and be kind of, normal, if you like.
Yeah. I understand. I think you've given us a good overview there of how the environment or the circumstances that you work with could work in favor of dealing with children. What about that second thought then of could doing heavy weight training with kids potentially stunt their growth during their key growing years?
Okay, so when I started to certainly when I started to get into a gym and apply more strength-based techniques of teaching exercises, it was a concern. I really had to do my homework and read my research and say, well, actually, we hear about all of these things, stunts growth, it's going to injure them. It's only adults should be doing this. And I couldn't find anything that supported those views apart from, their belief systems that people hold and pass down. The kids shouldn't be doing it. And to my knowledge, there is no evidence that that any weightlifting or weight training activities stunts growth. In fact, in the 14, 15 years, I've seen completely opposite. And yourself, Ben, when we look at taking people through, personal training courses, one of the things we talk about is progressive overload, and you must apply stress to the system if you want it to adapt. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the if you like, the outcome of any intervention physical activity program is a more robust, stronger individual. Regarding heavyweight training, well, that depends. And here's where I think there's this is where experience comes into it, and learning the skill of being a youth coach is that it's not about exercise and technique. Right, you've got to do it like this. It's about understanding the child and meeting the child where they need to be met. Some kids may respond to that, but others may not. Mm-hmm. And also others may not be ready for that type of loading because their movement patterns aren't correct. They're not doing it as well as they could. And you've just got to realize people get to points or kids get to points at different stages, and it can take years. I'm working with a girl now. She's just turned 11. And if you watch her deadlift and do Olympic lifting, she looks phenomenal, fantastic.
At 11,
yeah,
wow.
Absolutely brilliant. But get away from that stereotype that they're lifting heavy weights. I've set my facility up that actually I have child-friendly equipment, and the bars are not 20-kilo Olympic bars. I have plastic training bars, plastic training plates, jaw lock collars so that the kids can get them on easy instead of the clip collars. Mm-hmm. They move on to 5-kilo aluminium, all Olympic size plates that are plastic. So it's making sure you create the right environment for them to flourish, mm-hmm. that you actually can encourage movement first, if you like, and respond to what they really enjoy. I mean, this particular girl, she likes doing it. I'm not going to stop her doing something that's going to benefit her in the end. All I need to do is make sure that I facilitate the process of development over time. And here's one of the key components, I think, from any youth type training is quality supervision. Mm-hmm. You've got to supervise what they do. Okay, because they will, certainly in my experience, the boys, they will challenge themselves, will do things, or if it is weight training activities you're doing, they will try and lift more than they can handle. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things I noticed from when I started years ago, and this was with the swimming club I'm still working with, is that they sent me the top squad, the performance swimmers, the 15, 16-year-olds. And quite clearly, from previous years of working with 9, 10-year-olds, I had 9, 10-year-olds that moved better than these guys.
Oh, really? Wow.
At a later stage. And it's quite simple. If you've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of training behind you, you've got a good training age. So if you have a development process starting at 8, by the time you get to 15, you've been doing it 7 years. Mm. Okay, so if you come in at 15, you might be physically stronger, but it doesn't mean to say you move as well at 15, and you have to learn the technique. And the problem or the observation was, well, you know what, if you're coming at 15, you need to get stronger. And that's where things start to fall down, because there was a rush process.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You're
kind of alluding there, Dave, to something in our last episode of the show, in episode 28, we had JC Santana on, and he referred to that he likes to train people according to their ability rather than due to any specific category. And you seem to be alluding to the same concept, that you look at the person's or the child's ability, no matter their age. It's not a category by age, but it's a look at their ability and train them based on where they're at now, whether they're 10 or 15.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got to understand the individuals that would walk into your facility, and then pick them up from that point. Otherwise, if you try and clump them together and say, well, everyone's got to move from one stage to the next stage, it just doesn't work like that. Some individuals will pick things up faster. Some individuals prefer climbing activities. Some individuals prefer weightlifting activities. I'd like to think in my facility, I can cater for a lot of different needs within children's physical development.
So with that in mind then, Dave, do you, I'm just thinking about the number of children to trainer ratio. I mean, do you have any specific criteria that you prefer to work by there?
Well, I could tell you this, that the more kids you've got per one instructor, the harder work it's going to be, and the more you need eyes in the back of your head, particularly with the younger guys, as such, because kids are very social, and they will sit down, they will clump together, and they will talk and chat and what have you, and do stuff. So I'd probably say that 1 to 10 is certainly workable, doable. When it gets up to 15 to 20, generally it's probably best to have somebody else there, or maybe have a large space area like a sports or grass field where you can do some activities where naturally there's stuff that's not going to get them into trouble. Yes. If they decide to go off the path, so to speak. So it's definitely easier when there's fewer children. The more you put more children in there, the harder it is to contain and control. And I think you just need to accept that actually you might not get as much as you want out there, but keep in mind it's a development process. Yeah. Nobody does things perfectly first time. If you start someone at 7 or 8, really it's a timeline to when they become adult, as such. So, and the children, they pick things up differently in different ways, and they like certain things in different ways. And I think a good youth coach will be able to understand that and then meet their needs, and not train everybody the same, if you like, but give them activities that they enjoy. And I'll give you a good example of that. Is that, I have various sessions, junior strength, as I call it, junior running, but a lot of children that would be slightly overweight, if I can use that, would come along, or the parents would bring them along, and they'd say, right, go and run. We need them to run, but they hated it, absolutely hated it. And one thing you've got to understand, and I think we might touch on this about when do we need to get them started in these type of activities, is that there is almost like I wouldn't say a cutoff point, maybe that's not the right word, but there is a definite crossover where if you don't engage kids in certain activities, the right type of activities, they will buy out of physical activity generally.
Right.
Okay. And that normally, certainly in the UK, is around about crossing over to year 6 to year 7.
So we're looking like 11, 12, 13, that sort of age.
You've got that. And that will get worse as they get older. And the reason is because they become more self-conscious about themselves. And, if you look at a lot of young children, very young children, 3, 4, they're not really good at anything. But they give things a go, and there's a high enthusiasm to explore their environment. Mm-hmm. They do a lot, but not very good at it. But suddenly they go to school, they're with their peers, as their brain starts to develop, start to have an understanding about their self, and then their own ability, and being able to relate that to other children's abilities. Mm-hmm. So if you've got someone who can play football and they're really good at football, you can see that actually these children, they would not pick kids that are no good at football. There's no challenge there. There's no enjoyment. There's no fun there. And likewise, the kids that don't have that ability to play football, they're not going to enjoy playing football with the kids that can play football.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you don't build that skill and confidence, by the time you get to year 6, which is 11 to 12 years of age, you start to get the buyout of activity, because I can't do that. I'm no good at that. Why would I want to expose myself and show myself up? I've not been able to ball or do whatever.
So what would you do with those children who, as you said, are not natural runners? What would your choice of action be then?
Okay. So one thing I've noticed is, or one of the things about being a youth coach, is to build children's confidence. I think ultimately, you think about it, Ben, if you're not confident about something, you tend to avoid those types of situations.
Mm-hmm.
You hear all the time in adults, an adult will say, well, I can't do that. Well, why can't you do it? Because I can't. Well, why can't you do it? Because I can't do it. Have you tried doing it? No. Well, why would you be good at it if you never tried doing it?
Yeah.
So there's this age group, or there's this developmental years where actually, by allowing kids to engage in all forms of physical activity and developing their skills in certain areas is absolutely critical for their ability to carry that on into adulthood and have the confidence to be able to explore other forms of movement and do other things that are quite challenging. And if you look at literacy, it's referred to as physical literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And part of that is not just being physically literate, being able to move, but it's having that kind of confidence to be able to say, you know what, I can do it. And I think they're probably the saddest words I will hear. And even in ours, I can't, because, we don't live in a society where we don't have choices. Yes, you can. So confidence is absolutely pivotal to the sessions that I run at my center. And going back to your question is that, I don't know many kids that if they've got a little bit of a weight issue or they're slightly larger, they're not going to run like the kids that look like a stick.
Sure.
Play football. They just can't do it. So they don't want to do it. But I tell you what they're really good at. They're really good at lifting. And so you can take somebody and I've got a number of children who are like that. And if you put a bar there and set the bar up, as long as it's appropriate, they really enjoy it. And then because it makes them feel good and they're good at it. And generally they're a lot stronger than the kids that look like a stick that are good at running.
Right.
So that's where you start them. And I think that's where you've got to say, and I've heard this saying so many times, and I can't remember where I've heard it, but you meet the child where they need to be met. And from my experience, I understand that actually, you know what, certain children will be more suitable for certain activities. I think from my own developmental point of view is making sure I have a range of activities that all children can buy into. Mm-hmm. And all I do is I just work that and I set the challenges,
Nice.
rest their development until they're at a state where actually they can make choices themselves.
Now that kind of leads nicely into this next sort of thought process, Dave, which is you began to allude that we shouldn't train children the way we train adults or have expectations similar to adults. I wonder if we could outline, if we focus specifically on their physical conditioning, what would you say are maybe 2 or 3 differences that you like to work on when you're doing physical conditioning for children that is different to how you might physically condition an adult?
Okay. So the thing is, there's quite a lot of range there. So let's start with like young, where I start, generally 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. I do not focus on reps and sets. There's generally, there is a lower amount of structure as far as their programming, although there are certain things that I want to get across.
And why is that? Why would you not focus on sets and reps?
Because they're not emotionally mature enough to be responsible to be able to follow a program as such, or even in a lot of cases, follow a circuit workout, if you like. They just drift off. And,
so what age would you introduce using sets and reps? Or is it more of an ability thing?
Do you know what? And that can be a range. I work with a bunch of 15-year-olds, and you can tell when someone's starting to be mature enough to, if you like, exhibit adult qualities, because just an administration of a simple program card, can you follow these exercises? Can you record your results? Mm-hmm. I had a session this morning working in a school where they've got, we've got a strength and conditioning environment, and I'm working with 15-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Now, half of them can follow a program, half of them cannot. Wow. And you know this, because at the end of the term, you say, right, let's have a look at your program cards. And the thing is, it's not to beat up on the kids that haven't done that. It's more to the point where they're just not ready. They're not mature enough to follow that. And all you're doing is trying to guide them in that, because ultimately, as you become more adult-like, you tend to focus more on certain activities and you tend to put more energy into it. Mm-hmm. Whereas when we look at children and young people, they're more driven by the environment of being fun. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to try and understand that and set your coaching scenarios up to that as well. And that's certainly how I do it. Is I know some can, and all I say to them is really simple. Do you know what? here's a program card. I think it'd be beneficial to you, but you've got to be able to follow it if you can. And whether they do or they don't, I'm not going to beat myself up for it if they don't follow it. The point is over time, are they developing and doing some of the things I want to be able to do? And I would say probably once you get to that 14, 15, 16 year age group, they tend to go to more traditional strength exercises in a bigger way. Mm-hmm. But you still have to have the fun components and the challenges there, because they're still children at the end of the day.
So if I was to summarize that, we're sort of saying that in the younger children, there's a greater emphasis on fun and interactivity. And then you gradually, as they get older and they get more able and perhaps develop some physical strength, that you start to shift towards more structure, a little bit more of the weights work. Would that be fair?
It would be, actually. And I'll give you an example of one of the activities in the younger age group, which goes down well with virtually, all young children. And that is being on the monkey bar. So I've got a bit of a monkey bar setup. It's quite a good setup as well. And you know what? The kids will spend a whole hour on it. If I did nothing else, they would spend hanging from bars. But what I've set up is that actually there is a way I want them to do it. And then you put the challenges in there. So I have about 4 or 5 different levels of accomplishment, if you like. Ultimately, they will look like a chimpanzee swinging from one bar to another, like they would in the trees. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you think about it, you're developing shoulder strength and pulling strength. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's a great activity. So, from my mind, I'm thinking, I'm strengthening up their upper body. I'm strengthening up their pulling muscles. Later on, that might not look like a bent over row. But for now, it's something that's really fun and they want to do it. Yeah. And I'm not going to stop them doing it because, and I'm not going to put reps and sets to it. So they might go up and down the bars and you can put a challenge. Can you go up at this level? Can you do it 5 times? Can you do it 6 times? And they will naturally go for it.
Yeah.
Because it makes them feel good.
Kids have that kind of natural competitive drive to want to try and achieve something, don't they?
They do, yeah. It's only when they start to increase their body mass where actually monkey bars becomes quite difficult and quite hard because of increasing mass. But actually, and then there's probably a more emphasis on, I want to look and feel a little bit better. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, we live in an age with social media. It's a lot different to when you and I were probably younger. It's very much appearance and stuff like that, and yourself, working out makes you feel good. So I'd probably say that's the biggest difference between the two. We have a lot more fun, a lot less structure, but I still want to dip in some aspects of skill, balance, coordination, crawling, gym. We do a lot more floor gymnastic based stuff, handstands, cartwheels, balances, monkey bar stuff, then the early ages. But even at the early ages, I'm still dropping in stuff that's going to be relevant, like triple extension. If you get a ball and throw a ball, and if you throw it over a box or a high area, you get the extension tips. Jumping, and I think from an empowerment perspective, okay, is allowing them to set their own training up, because kids are very creative, and you don't want to stop that. Mm-hmm. You want to get them to explore movement. So often with the younger ones, say, well, let's write up on the board. Let's see what you want to do. Let's create your own circuit. So they have a sense of empowerment, because one of the most important things is a strong principle of mine is I want to develop role models. Mm-hmm. So they can be role models to other children as well. Mm-hmm. And a strategy, I think, from an engagement point of view, is when they get good at something, they want to show other kids how good they are as well. So you can put them in a coaching role, mm-hmm. Which empowers them even further. And for me, is you can't work with people if they're not in your session. Yeah. So I've got to use strategies and techniques to keep them in the session and enjoying the sessions. So they've got to be fun, they've got to be enjoyable, and it's got to be about being feeling good, a positive environment. And when they get to 14, 15, 16, you can have, your conversations are different, but they will probably go into more traditional based strength exercises with more structure if they are capable of doing it.
Well, that leads us nicely into kind of the last thought, because unbelievably, this half an hour's already flown by, Dave. And that is, you've talked there about as they get a little older, that you might move them towards something a bit more of structure. And we've touched on lots of the things I wanted to ask anyway, just through the process of the conversation. But one area we haven't really touched on yet is about the fundamental weightlifting that we are used to doing as adults. Now, if I was to identify sort of three key weightlifting exercises, the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, and then even more sport specific type stuff such as Olympic lifting, the clean and jerk, the snatch, those kind of exercises, are they appropriate for children? And if they are, when would you introduce them and why?
Right. Okay. Well, I introduced them at a very early age. So even with the youngest individuals, 8, I want them to be able to. Now, I might not put it in a traditional squat or deadlift, but I will select activities. And I touched on one activity, which was throwing a ball, just throwing the ball over an object of some sort. You've got, naturally, the body will drop down and then extend to get the ball up. So I'm dripping that type of, movement pattern, if you like, squat, deadlift, Olympic lifting from a very early age. They also start to learn Olympic lifting from an early age, basic power cleans, basic movements, and you just touch in, you touch out, you touch in. There's no structure there, certainly at 9 and 10 years of age. However, something like Olympic lifting, it takes a long time to learn. And the best time to learn anything is as a young child, because your brain is like accelerating in its development and the connections are accelerating. It's like a sponge, it's soaking up information. So it's the best time to do it is at a younger age. And they can all do it.
Really?
Along with just teaching basic exercise, you're teaching them the rules of the environment, the gym etiquette that goes along with it. And, I'm certainly in my facility, the guys from a young age know how to spot a bench press. They know how to set up the squat using the squat rack at 11 and 12 years of age. They know how to take weights off a bar properly and put it back afterwards. So, and that's just the rules of the game that actually, which you don't often see in adult gyms leaving weights about.
No, for sure.
But you teach kids to do that from a young age. So I'm a big proponent of getting it in early. I'd say that actually if you go down the reps and sets and structure, then probably that's not a good idea. You want to keep it very like kind of free thinking, free flowing, because ultimately what you see at 10 years of age is totally different to what you get at 16. And I think if you can get the movement patterns bolted down by 15, 16, then you can start that hard physiological training. And if I go back to my experience working with a swimming club when they first introduced their swimmers to 15, 16, well, they didn't have the movement patterns. They would have had to spend the 2 to 3, perhaps 4 years, but they wanted to work on the physiology to get stronger, but just not ready for it.
Right.
So the earlier you introduce that stuff, if it's appropriate, and going back, you need to meet the child would need to be met. In my experience, certainly the kids love the weight training, but you just got to make sure it's set up, light plastic training bars, light plates to make them look like they're doing it properly, create the right area, right collars, and they will enjoy that environment. And can I touch on one point?
Go for it. If there is one other thing, I'd like to, let's conclude on this last point.
Yeah, so there's a big emphasis on sport. And I love sport. I grew up playing sport, and I think sport is fantastic. It develops you in so many ways, but there are so many kids these days that don't buy into the sport-based model, particularly into schools. Okay, so when they get to that year 7, if they can't play football, if they're not a good runner, they tend to buy out of sport. I think this environment, the gym environment, can sit alongside, the sport-based model of training and apply a physical development model, with basic movements, a fun environment, but that there's this non-competitiveness to a degree. I think competition is good, but I think some kids, you've got to understand the child. The competition is with themselves, and you've got to make them feel good, and you've got to make them. So I think the gym environment and activities for children where they can explore movement and do fun things, and you have the opportunity to develop them over time, I think there is a need for that type of model to sit alongside the traditional sport-based model that normally goes on.
I think that's really well said, Dave. I would totally agree. As a father with kids and seeing my kids' development as they've grown up, I totally agree. Not everybody is into sport. I love sport as a kid, but not my boys are not all into sport. Some are, some are not. And so to have an alternative angle, an alternative way to send them so they can still enjoy movement, like you said, I think is absolutely spot on. It's been a real pleasure, Dave, having you here and to talk through some of these key elements of strength, conditioning, physical performance, fitness, however we want to word it. And I appreciate your expertise and your years of experience in this field. So thank you very much for your time today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Ben. So anytime, I really enjoy our conversations that we have, and it's great catching up over this podcast.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share via social media. You can also rate the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. If you'd like to know more about us, then check out our range of online courses at www.nordicfitnesseducation.com.